Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming to another very special event for the Tisch Center. This has been an extraordinary year for our lecture series. If you remember back in the fall, we started with our Cal Ramsey lecture, where we had former baseball commissioner Fay Vincent moderate a panel. Then this semester, in February, we had a presentation about doing business in India, about global tourism opportunities and luxury hotels, presented by Raymond Dixon, the CEO of Taj Hotels, part of Tata Group, the largest corporation in India. In March, we had our Brenner lecture series with Jason Pomerantz, kind of a celebrity among celebrities in the boutique hotel business. And tonight, we have our Arthur Miller Public Dialogues panel. I'm not sure any place else in the world could have the availability of just magnificent speakers that we've had. So I feel very, very grateful for that. I hope you've enjoyed them. Tonight, the timing was not intentional, but March is Women's History Month. That was declared by presidential proclamation in 1980. And because tonight's theme is women in sports, I also just did the quick calculation. 45% of our graduate student body is female, and 50% of our undergraduate student body in sports is female. We have many special guests tonight, and if I went through the list, we wouldn't have time for the panel, but I wanted to recognize we have students from the Business and Sports High School. Would you just stand so we can welcome you? I won't call out names, but we have students, alumni, and faculty from other schools across NYU, and someone who's almost at every one of our events is the Dean of the School of Continuing and Professional Studies. In case you don't know him, I'll ask him to stand, Dean Robert Lappiner. And we're very fortunate to have, as part of SCPS, the person who will be our moderator tonight, Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller, distinguished intellectual, faculty member, author, television commentator, lawyer, really an extraordinary background. His biggest claim to fame is not that he was John Sexton's law professor, but that's one of his resume items. Very substantial legal practice with cutting-edge testimony before tribunals, bodies, trial matters, with civil matters of privacy rights, all types of civil liberty types of issues. He has a career in television, not only his academic career, but also as a practicing lawyer, and then as an author of many well-regarded treatises in law. To get ready for his gig at NYU, he was on the Harvard faculty, so he stepped up to NYU. He's now part of us. And then maybe it'll be the highlight of his career. Tonight, he's going to be moderating another panel for the Tisch Center. So we're really fortunate, again, to have someone with the credentials and respect that he has in, again, so many communities of business and academia and law and broadcasting and media and publishing. So our format tonight will be, as I'm finishing up, our panel will be taking seats. Arthur will then moderate the panel. He will decide right timing and things for questions. If we do have time for questions, please come up to the microphones. Please say your name, why you're here. If you're not a Tisch Center student, please introduce yourself. And then at the end of the event, we'll end just a few minutes before 8 o'clock. We'll break for a reception so you have a chance to meet our panelists tonight. What an extraordinary panel we have. So please, welcome to the stage a legal scholar and a great intellectual luminary, Arthur Miller.
Let's start by introducing yourselves. There are 11 of you. They have a lot of biographical information, but in order to enable them to understand what we have up here, Jodi, who are you?
I'm a former legal executive with the NFL. I spent a dozen years in-house working on a wide variety of issues at the National Football League, and now I am with the NYU's Law School.
So why do you think you're here?
I'm here because you keep picking on me, Arthur, every time you need someone to fill in one of these panels.
Oh, is that why you're taking another job next year?
You can still pick on me then.
Karin?
Hello, I am currently the Vice President of Community Relations and Field Marketing for MSG's pro sports teams, the Knicks, the Rangers, and the Liberty. We have a game tonight that I'm missing, and I'm glad to be here.
Who's playing tonight?
The Celtics.
The Celtics.
Yeah, it's a good game.
That's the team from Boston?
Yeah. But I'm glad to be here. And I was a former professional tennis player. Sports has defined me, and I'm really thrilled to be able to be on this panel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Chang. I'm Vice President of Broadcasting at IMG, which means I'm a talent agent within the broadcasting division. Prior to arriving at IMG, I spent 12 years at CBS Sports, the last 6 of which I was more of a buyer. Now I'm a seller, so to speak.
See anybody out there worth representing?
I
No
need my
answer.
glasses.
No answer. Wendy?
Good evening, I'm Wendy Hilliard, and I have my own foundation up in Harlem, the Wendy Hilliard Foundation, but my background is from gymnastics. I'm in the Hall of Fame for USA Gymnastics from Rhythmic Gymnastics, but I went on to become president of the Women's Sports Foundation. I headed the sports division for the New York Olympic bid, and I work a lot with community kids often.
I've never been this close to a Hall of Famer.
Here we are.
Well, I like it. I like it. Dana?
You can get closer to her, probably. My name's Dana Jacobson. I am, in short, an ESPN anchor. I'm one of a handful of women there, and I have been there almost 9 years now, which scares me to say sometimes. Before that, I was a local sports anchor working in Sacramento and in Traverse City, Michigan, a tiny, tiny market where I carried my own camera and shot my own stand-ups and edited the whole thing and threw it together. And I like to say I lucked into sports, and I'm glad that I did.
Now, are you a U of M graduate?
I am. Go Blue. Almost beat Duke. It was
Almost
so
beat
close.
Duke. I know.
You had to go there, didn't you?
Well, I never went to Michigan, but I was on the Michigan Law faculty for 7 years.
Did you see the law library? It's beautiful.
Did I see it? I built
I
it.
know. It's beautiful. I studied there.
What do you think? They
between
let me
games.
teach? I built the damn
Well,
thing.
you're teaching. You don't have to go in there.
No, those were 7 of the happiest years of my life. Never missed a football game. Never missed a football game.
They were better then.
They sure as hell were.
I know.
They actually had 11 people to play. Pat?
My name is Pat Manocchia. I am the owner of Palestra Center for Preventative Medicine, which is an integrated medical wellness facility. We work with pregnant women and athletes and people with back problems. Former professional hockey player, and my lasagna is spectacular.
You're a bodybuilder and eat and make lasagna?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't think you can.
Is it vegetarian or meat?
No. We're big meat eaters.
Big meat eaters.
Family, yeah.
That's ethnic, isn't it?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Cameron?
I don't cook at all, but I did go very fast on a sled, which was my first career. I competed on 4 Olympic teams in the sport of luge and had a couple of firsts for women. I was actually the first American to win any international medal and the first woman to win a World Cup. But one of the coolest things I did, though, was to carry the flag at the opening ceremonies in Norway. But after I retired from sport, I decided to go to law school because I thought it would be almost as much fun as doing luge.
Nobody said your judgment was very good.
So
How's that working out for you?
I currently am an intellectual property lawyer at Frankfurt Kernet, and on occasion represent Olympic athletes in doping disputes.
Mike?
Good evening. I'm Mike Ozanian. I work at Forbes. I've been there about 13 years. One of the things I do there is cover the business of sports, and I also am part of a show on the Yes Network called Forbes SportsMoney, which, as you might guess from the name, has to do with the business of sports as well.
Ted Shaker. I've worked in the media business my adult life at CBS News and CBS Sports, at Time Warner, at Sports Illustrated and at CNN, and then at CNBC, and since then in the consulting business for all things news and sports.
Now, let me embarrass Ted. How many Emmys do you have?
I have 12 more than you do.
What he means to say is he has 13 Emmys, and by indirection, I've only got one.
And Ted was my first boss, too.
Yes.
My name is Susan Spencer. I have the distinction, and sometimes I wonder whether it's the proper distinction, of being the only woman that's ever been a general manager of a professional football team, the Philadelphia Eagles. I know all you guys out there are saying, how the hell did she get that job? Well, I could tell you I was a lawyer, which I am. I could tell you that I was a good business person, which I am. But then I could tell you the truth. My dad owned the team. So that usually trumps it. And a very difficult boss to work for. And I realized that I became the acting general manager when everybody else around me got fired but me, and I went into his office and I said, oh, I guess I got the top job, huh? And that's basically how I got it.
And now?
And now, I was a businesswoman for 25 years in the meat business. I guess I just loved that red meat. I couldn't figure it out. And I've written a book for women about women's skills in business. It's called Briefcase Essentials. No plug intended, but it's a book that really, I think my experience in being in male-dominated industries my whole life has taught me if there's one thing you need to do, it's to sell yourself, because you've got a lot to sell. Women have great qualities, and I want to see women fulfill their dreams and do what I did, and follow your passions.
Connee.
When I get worried about being as old as I am, I remind myself that I was born at a perfect time for a woman athlete, because I came into college the year Title IX was passed. That opened up unbelievable opportunities for me as a college athlete. And then post-college, I was a very young athletic director at 25 years old in a Division II college, and had opportunities at all 3 NCAA divisions in college athletics, and spent 33 years loving every minute of being an administrator in college athletics.
That's our panel, and it's a wealth of experience and a wide range of vocations and activities. Now, when a couple of us created these dialogues on sports in America, our objective was to dig beneath the issues of sports to see how they relate to American society. There are those who believe that sports, whether you're thinking of it domestically or whether you're thinking of it internationally, sports is a universal language. It's something that binds people together. It enables them to talk to each other. We've had programs on the meaning of sports in society. We've had programs on the lures of performance-enhancing drugs. We've explored the question of race and sports. Sports, if you stop and think about it, has been a remarkable vehicle for well over 100 years. At the top of the 20th century, for example, the Irish used track and boxing, and then broke out of the bounds of immigrant status. The Italians also used boxing and baseball to break out of their immigrant boundaries. The Jews used inner-city basketball as a vehicle for self-development and, some would say, assimilation. Eastern Europeans used football as their mechanism. African Americans have used every game, practically, every sport. That's been their avenue to inclusion. Now, in some ways, sports has been ahead of the professions. In some ways, sports has been ahead of the academic world. What we're going to explore tonight is the degree to which we are still on the frontier in terms of women and their utilization and development and involvement in sports. As Connee mentioned, it's been the law of this land for 4 decades that colleges and other academic institutions provide equality of access to men and women. Some of you will recall that it's about 38, 39, 40 years ago that Billie Jean King took on Bobby Riggs in a one-off tennis game, and she beat him. And that had something to do with increasing the visibility of feminism and women in our society. But I think most people would say it's been a herky-jerk affair over these years. There have been periods of escalation of women in sports, and there are other periods in which women in sports as a phenomenon have flattened out. We're going to take the pulse tonight as to where we are now, why we are there, and where we might be tomorrow, not March 22nd, but maybe 2020, 2030. Now, these panelists have been told absolutely nothing about what we're going to do. That's very important that you understand that this is a spontaneous, unrehearsed, unscripted discussion. Indeed, the only advice I have given these 11 people is make believe you're at a bull session. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a bull session. And part of that bull session, indeed most of that bull session, is going to take the form of storytelling, of a hypothetical. I've asked them to suspend reality and play along in the hypothetical. As Bjorn has said, your turn will come. When it will come, I don't know, just as I don't know what I'm going to do with these people at this point. How many of you, over this past weekend, turned on your television set and watched any piece of March Madness? How many of you? Come on, raise them high. About half the panel, half the panel. Now, how many of you out there? Fess up. Oh, look at that, look at that. Almost everyone in this room watched a piece of March Madness.
I had to track my pool results.
What was that?
I had to track my pool results.
You're in a pool?
Yes.
Come on, you've got immunity
for
from
fun
criminal
only, right?
prosecution.
Just for fun.
For fun,
Nothing
yeah.
more
not
at
for
stake.
Which raises an interesting question. How many people out there are in an office or some kind of pool, whether for fun or for money?
Yeah, they are.
Ask how many are not.
I'd be interested to know how many have a women's bracket as well as a men's
There you
bracket.
go.
Yeah, well, you read the moderator's mind.
I apologize.
You read the moderator's mind. How many of you watched the NCAA first round over the weekend? Dana did. But Dana, come on, that's your job, isn't it?
I don't have to watch. I can read about it. I don't have to turn it on.
Oh, I should get my television reporting from the
You
newspaper
could.
you read.
I do have to sleep sometimes.
That's
I do
really
go to
terrific.
sleep. I do an early show. I don't see every last minute of everything.
But you watched the piece of it.
I watch some of it, yeah.
You watched the piece of it. How many people out there watched the women play yesterday? A smattering. Now, you watched it only because I watched it, right? So keep your damn hand down. Now, what is it now? It's 10 to 7. It's 10 to 7. We're here, right? At 7:05, the team that has won more NCAA basketball championships, coached by someone who has more NCAA basketball victories than any coach in American history. I don't care if you say Dean Smith or Krzyzewski or even Bobby Knight, for those who still can mouth the words Bobby Knight. That's the coach of the team playing in about 8 minutes, Tennessee. Tennessee. And we're here. Right?
Sure.
We're here. Now, I suggest to you that some of what we have just done in a highly sort of impressionistic way is an illustration of a dichotomy in the attention given to men's sports and women's sports. So let's proceed hypothetically. Let's proceed hypothetically. Let's go to heaven. It's a real hypothetical. Let's go to heaven. And you know, up in heaven, they have an area for athletics. It was formerly housed for lawyers, but they have no one up there to occupy it. So they've given it over to athletics.
What if you're an athlete and a lawyer?
You're a tough case. You're a tough case. And there, meeting on the track, are Babe Didrikson and Wilma Rudolph. Everybody on this panel know who Babe Didrikson and Wilma Rudolph are? Yeah. Everyone in this audience know who Babe Didrikson and Wilma Rudolph are? I see heads bobbing up and down, but I don't have any great confidence in that, actually. Connie, who are they? Who were they?
Wilma Rudolph was one of the most outstanding, actually the fastest woman at the 1960 Rome Olympics, many-time gold medalist and internationally known as one of the best athletes ever. She was a member of the Tiger Bells. She was also a very accomplished basketball player, well accomplished as you could be, you know, in those years. Babe Didrikson was earlier than that. She was born in like around 1911. 17?
1917, I think.
And she also started as a basketball player, but you wouldn't know that as well. Was an accomplished track athlete, accomplished golfer, was president of the LPGA, and really accomplished everything. I mean, she played billiards. She beat men in baseball throws. She was the finest woman athlete, I think, of the century.
As opposed to the other Babe, Ruth.
And that's why she was called Babe, because she hit 5 home runs in a game, you know, or many, 5. I'm really drawing on some question here. But yeah, that's why they called her Babe.
Okay, let's suppose you're up there with them, and you're listening to them talking.
Fun, yes. Oh, I'd like that.
They're looking down at us. After 40 years of Title IX and 39 years after the Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs, what do you think they're saying to each other? Are they happy with what they see?
I think, you know, with everything being relative, they'd be thrilled at a lot of things. I think Babe would look at Annika Sorenstam playing at the Colonial and going, wow, she got to compete against men, and really there was only one really terrible male saying that that shouldn't happen, Vijay Singh, and otherwise it was embraced pretty well. I think they'd be happy at all the participation opportunities from the grassroots up. I think one of the things, you know, I'm hopeful that they would really feel good about the fact that women are allowed in team sports now. They were permitted to excel in individual sports. They had a much tougher time in the team sports, and if you follow your sociology of sport, you know, they'll say, well, team sports were too aggressive for women, they were too physical. But really, sociologists will tell you that the one thing that they don't talk about is that then, and I would contend now, they still don't want women in groups. They don't want power groups networking with women. So, you know, there was always reluctance to have women in sport, but it was much more palatable as an individual sport athlete than a team sport athlete. So I think they'd be thrilled that women are allowed in team sports now.
So they clearly see progress.
They still see progress in participation. I think they'd be really concerned about the fact that the media isn't where it needs to be. I mean, if you look back at old newsreels, Babe Didrikson was covered a lot, and probably more than most women can get
But
media coverage now.
Isn't some of it because she was one of, it was her, and now, you know, and yes, it's my company, and you can say I say it because it's my company. We may be here, but the women's tournament is on ESPN and is given that forum. Now there are more female athletes, so it's not covered in that light because it's not as unique, and comes down to money too. It's not watched as much, even if it is covered, and that's sort of the reality of sports as a business too.
It is absolutely the reality, but I contend that the oversaturation of the men's major sports, you know, they've paid too much for the rights fees, and now they have to get that money back. And so they do these pre-game shows, these post-game shows. They've used all of the opportunities to show other sports, men's or women's sports, and they've just isolated it to this small group, and yeah, it's an oversaturated market on a small number of sports, and that helps men's other sports as well.
What I'm hearing is pluses and minuses. Pluses and minuses. Sort of herky-jerky, in a way. All right. Has there ever been a Babe Didrikson since Babe Didrikson?
Well, Jackie Joyner-Kersee would be someone you might be able to compare.
So we've got Marion Jones. We'll ignore her criminality.
Right.
Flo Jo. Okay, so there have been some female superstars. Some.
In tennis, there has been.
Wendy could tell us about all the great gymnasts.
Wait. You were saying, Ted?
You said we should all talk at the same time. You know, tennis, women's tennis, has broken through quite unlike any other sport, it seems to me, in terms of general interest.
I think it's because of the outfits they wear.
I don't.
No, but I would, when you go to multi-sport, I would also say Althea Gibson, because she was actually a really great golfer as well. So I think
okay, enough of this history stuff. I have for you a possible 21st century combination of Babe, and Wilma, and Althea, and Serena. And remember, this is a hypothetical. It's me. It's me. I am a 15-year-old young woman. I say I'm 15. In point of fact, I'm actually 14. I won't be 15 until June. But I can do it all. I can swim. I can run. I can hit a ball. I can throw a ball. I can play basketball. I can play baseball. I can do it all. And that's not just in my head. I'm a certifiable phenom. I am. I'm also a fairly smart kid. And I think beyond this coming Saturday night's date. I'm thinking about a life in sports. A life in sports. If I really am as good as they say I am, I really want to know whether I can have a life in sports. Now, I have two wonderful parents. Jodi, you're my mother. And Ted, you're my father.
Do your homework.
Well, I want to know what you think about your daughter, your almost 15-year-old daughter, saying to you, Mom, I know your background. You did a great deal in sports. You made a career out of sports for many, many years. That's what I want to do. What do you think?
I think it's a fantastic idea. I think that you will now be much less likely to be involved in substance abuse and other forms of delinquency. Your chances of a healthy, long life are much improved. Your leadership skills will be promoted and built up. Your access to a whole variety of post-athletic career opportunities are greatly expanded. I say bravo.
You're
Brava.
really into this.
Yes.
Now, you won't mind, would you, if I skip college?
Can't skip college.
Why can't I skip college?
You have to get your education. You have to be prepared for possible life post-athletics, which could be a lot sooner than you think because of the risk of injury.
Well, why can't I do that after sports?
Depends on the sport. I wouldn't make a blanket decision, you must go to college now, but depends on how you're going to work in a complete intellectual education along with your physical education. Got to do
you're
both.
just saying that because you're a dumb academic yourself.
I think college will always be there. And when you're young, I actually took 2 years off after high school and played on the tour because I wasn't good enough to get a scholarship to college, and just focused on it. My parents didn't want me to do it, and it was the best decision of my life.
But you eventually went to college.
I went to college. But
Hey, Arthur?
I would say that I would pursue my athletic ability and try to maximize that while I was young and in my prime, and then later on I could go to school.
See, that seems perfectly reasonable.
There has to be a plan, though.
A plan.
There needs to be a plan that you will get your education.
Arthur, what's our socioeconomic background? What kind of, where are we?
Why is that relevant? Next thing you'll ask me is whether we're white or black.
No, but I want to know how
No,
big
I'm
you are.
not that interested in that. I just want to know if we are flush or not so flush.
Let's
Are we
suppose we are upper middle class.
upper middle class.
Upper middle class.
Okay.
But my grades are good enough, by the way, to get either an athletic scholarship or an academic scholarship. So what's the relevance?
Means, I mean, you know, if you're going to, by the way, you look beautiful tonight. But if
so wonderful to have an adoring father.
Support. You know, if we're living in somewhere in the Midwest, and you know you're going to public school, and public school programs are under a lot of pressure, and you know, as far as sports programs, after school, all that stuff, that plays a part in making decisions, it seems to me, as to what you can and can't do, how much attention you can get to maximize your potential.
What are you worried about?
I'm
I mean, you've seen me. You've seen my skills. I mean, presumably some of my skills, most of my skills, come from you.
I'd say, yeah.
I won't
that's probably
suggest
right.
they came from anywhere else,
I agree.
Dad.
Yeah, I agree. I guess you know, if you have so many, if you're talented in so many different ways, it kind of becomes an interesting question as to where do you focus? You know, which do you feel the most passionate about? It would largely, I think, focus you in a certain direction, and then you try to maximize that.
Well, look,
potential.
you've been in the TV business your entire adult life. You watch the panorama of sports. Where do you think a woman of more mature years than I am now is likely to make a breakthrough? Is it a team sport, like basketball, WNBA, possibly? Is it tennis? Is it swimming?
I think it's got to be a sport that's a 12-month, you know, where you can play as many months of the year as possible. That you're not just focused on, say, you know, the Olympics every 4 years necessarily. I mean, if you want to truly make a career out of it.
Yeah, what do you mean by a breakthrough? What does that mean?
Well, I've done some historical reading about Wilma and Babe and Althea. I want to be like them.
Yeah.
And thus far, they say I got a shot at it.
Yeah. We're very proud of you.
I would ask you, what is your favorite sport? What do you love to do? What would you prefer to do over any other sport? And you know, if you have that passion and the desire to play that particular sport, there's got to be one that you like better than the others.
Passion's the key, isn't it?
Passion is the key, and
Well, it
that can
depends
get
if-
you up at 4:30
But I'm
in the morning
interested
if you
that
wanna-
my parents, for the first time in my admittedly short life,
Right.
are talking to me about following my passion.
After you do your homework.
How much money do you want to make too? As Your aunt, I would ask you.
And how long do you want your competitive career?
How do you want to live your life later? Because if you want to make the most of your money, then I would advise you, having been in the TV business also, that you go for an individual sport and you make a name for yourself in that light and look for sponsorship deals. You are good. You're one of the best out there. But you'll stand out more as an individual.
And your career will last longer.
But as your family consultant, I would also want to know how big you are. How big are you?
You guys, there's one really important fact that is brought up a little bit. There's no guarantees. There are absolutely no guarantees in sport. No matter what sport you're picking. You roll your ankle, you get an ACL, you're out of it. So it does have to be your passion. And if your parents were athletes or successful, they'll most likely tell you to follow your passion. If you're that smart to be good in that many sports, you're smart enough to be able to handle college when it comes. I had to take off college. You know, there's no scholarships in rhythmic gymnastics, even though I was one of the best in the country. I came back to NYU and finished the Gallatin division. Thank you very much. But, you know, if I'm your parent and you're that talented, you're that smart. And you have to do your passion, and there are no guarantees. You can't guarantee money, and you can't guarantee competitive success.
No, but there are lifespans, right? The lifespan of a gymnast is much shorter than the lifespan of a golfer, right? There's simple wear and tear issues on the body. I mean, whether it's a boy or a girl, a 14-year-old, if they're small and they're going to get into a contact sport, they've got a much shorter lifespan. And forget about things like head injuries. I mean, do you want to play football?
Well, I was going to come to talk to you, Pat, because you're my trainer. You're my trainer, and you've been training me for a bit, not that long, because I am under 15. Tell me what, if I really pursue sports, participation in sports, let's leave to one side what I might do after sports. What's my training going to be like? Will you train me any differently than you train a boy?
No. It's going to consume you. It's going to be your whole life. It's going to be what you do. You're not going to, you know, the same as any other elite athlete in any sport. It is what they do. This is their job.
That's why you have to love it.
You have to absolutely love it.
That's why you have to absolutely
You have to
love it.
be.
What's going to make you play for 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, get up at 4:30 and do your sprints and do your, you know, you've got to love it.
Yep.
I've got to love it. Well, right now, this little girl loves it, loves it. Do you have any advice to me in terms of participation as to which sports? Because I sort of like them all. Yeah, maybe I like a couple of them a little bit more, but I'm flexible.
As your trainer, I'm going to probably spend a little more time with you at the events, getting a sense of whether or not you're better suited to a team environment or to an individual environment, because that's really your personality. You're still pretty young. And if you're doing both at this age, it's hard to tell which of those are going to be more satisfying to you over a period of time. And that's really an issue of personality. It's not an issue of physiology at that point, you know.
So as far as you're concerned, you're looking to what it is I like, what it is I take to.
And who you are.
What do you mean, who I am?
Who you are, what your character is like. Are you a team-oriented individual, or do you want to fly by yourself? You know, this is an individual sport. The tennis player that stands on a court by themselves has a very different mentality than a point guard.
So this is a little bit of psychology.
Oh, it's a lot of psychology.
A lot of psychology.
And it's also whether, you know, what are you pointing towards? Is it to be the very best you can be in the sport that you love the most, regardless of, you know, how much fame and fortune there'll be coming down the road? Or is this something that you're going to try to maximize your potential, make money, which will set you up for an afterlife when you're not playing any longer?
Well, as they say in the Marine recruiting posters, I want to be the best I can be.
Yeah.
I want, at this point, to pursue a few sports, which is still possible at the high school level. I assume that I will gravitate or be advised as to whether to go, let's say, to basketball or to tennis or to some other sport.
My advice to you, though, and I would talk to our parents here about this, would be based on the safety of the child, right, and the longevity of their capacity in that given event, right? So if you were that good at rugby, I might try and dissuade you from that. I might try to say, because you want to go play rugby, and in the NFL, you want to be a safety, because that's what Althea, because you want to have that kind of an impact socially. That's a discussion we need to have. Can you have the impact socially in a sport that's already well-trodden by women, right? Can you have the impact as a tennis player? There's a lot of stud women tennis players, and there have been for many years. So for you to go be that person, you're going to have to go win more titles than Martina, and that's a long time. For you to go play in the NFL, you're immediately that.
I'll tell you what I wake up thinking, Pat. I really love baseball. I really love baseball.
Yeah.
Do you think you can make a Major League Baseball player out of me? They tell me, you've told me,
yep,
I have great eye-hand coordination.
Yep. And you're fast.
I was born with it. You know that.
Yeah, you can play baseball. Yep.
At the highest level?
Highest level.
Why do you say that?
Because I've seen you run. I've seen you run. I've seen what kind of power you have. I see your tenacity. You're very flexible. You have tremendous agility. You'd be a great utility and feel a good second baseman.
Then why hasn't there been a woman baseball player at the highest level?
Because there are no structures for a woman at the lowest level to develop those skills.
See, I love Ichiro. I'm really a Yankee fan. But I watch Ichiro, and he's fast as a deer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great hand,
yep,
great instinct,
yep,
great bunter, wrist hitter.
Yep.
That's me.
Mm-hmm.
You think I can do it?
I think we're in trouble. I think because right now, you have to play, for you to play at that level, to go to the next level, you have to now play exclusively on male teams. Because there are no female teams for 14-year-olds at hardball. They're going to give you the competitive situation that you're going to need to progress.
How do I do that?
You beg your parents.
What do I beg my parents?
To bring you somewhere.
To create a team that will accept a woman?
Yeah, to bring you to wherever that is. Right. Because somewhere they will. So some kid right now who's playing in Nova Scotia somewhere sends their kid to Flint, Michigan, who's 13, 14 years old, 15 years old, to live with another family, to play in the International Hockey League because they don't have it in Nova Scotia. That's what's going to have to happen. Your parents are going to probably have to send you somewhere or go with you somewhere.
Now,
they're going to have to change their life to have you do this.
Mom and Dad?
Yep.
This is where I think the hypothetical falls apart a little bit, because actually there's very few people who are in the position to support their children in the way that you're describing. I think a lot of the decision-making that goes on in youth athletics is far more limited to what the family can afford, what the family needs, how many
yes,
how
but
many athletes from
Dad's
less
asked already about finances.
Oh yeah, no. If she's that good, she'll get the opportunity financially. It won't be a financial issue. It'll be an issue of sending your daughter out of your house at 14 years old, or you moving, because someone will come with so we'll get the money. Don't worry about that.
Also,
kiddo. We'll get the money.
And call the media. Have mom and dad call, and the evil media actually can do some good. Start putting some attention on. Never seen a 14-year-old girl with your ability. You are a 5-tool player, and you're a girl. You're a 14-year-old girl. Everybody's going to want to do a story on you. You're on the show tomorrow morning.
And you won't tell them I'm only 14, or will you
They'll
tell
love
them I'm
that.
15?
They'll love that you're 14 or 15. Are you kidding? If you were 13, it would be even better.
You're not going to get, even if you have talent, you're not going to get enough women to go into male team sports because there are cultural differences as well. I mean, what are you going to do? You could change in the men's locker room? Travel in the men's club?
Ouch, you got to stop.
No.
I can't.
No,
I can't.
But why do there have to be enough? Why can't there just be some?
Because you're not going to be able to, if you have one, the only way a league is going to grow, like same thing you mentioned at Chiro, right? Well, what followed Ichiro was more Asian players, right? Just like when they didn't allow African Americans into the major leagues. They didn't stop with Jackie Robinson. They brought more in. They allowed more in. That's the only way economically it's going to grow, and it's all about economics. We could sit here and postulate about theories and parents and friends, but in the end, it all comes down to economics. So you mentioned the networks overpaying. Well, they sure disagree with you because they're paying more now.
They are paying more.
They're starting their own conference, TV conferences.
Yeah, but don't you think if there was a woman who was pitching in a major league game that every network would want to cover that?
It may happen for a very short period of time, but it's not going to be sustainable.
Even
if
the
she's
player-
good
Depends on
enough
her
to be
ERA.
on that, yeah, it depends on that team and how good she is. If she still competes at that level, she gets it because she gets all that attention because she's the only woman, and then continues to compete at the same level as the men. Okay, she's going to have to change in a different clubhouse. There may be a couple other women that eventually join her. There may never be enough to have their own team, but that doesn't mean that it's not viable to have one or two.
I understand what you're saying, but unless you get enough where there's going to be a lot of people into the league, I don't care whether you were talking about African Americans.
But you're not talking about a different league. You're talking about going to play in Major League Baseball.
Then it's not going to lead to a movement where you're going to build up a sustainable influx of those people into that league, whatever minority was being prejudiced against.
No, why do you need them, Mike?
Because if you get, to go back to how you postulated this whole theory, if you're looking at role models, like you were talking about Babe Bickerson, these were women that were looked up to by other women, and probably other men who didn't admit it at the time, right? Great athletes. But if you're seeing where the avenues can lead to, just like you were saying, you know, where am I going to have a sustainable career? Your choice. Am I going to have one where there's physical injury? Am I going to have one where I have an opportunity for women? You're not going to see an influx into Major League Baseball, and you're certainly not going to see it in professional football, and you're not going to see it in professional ice hockey.
No,
you
but
can't even see it
you
in
might
basketball, which is why you have the WNBA.
You might see more women covering it and more women in charge, and more. You may see it in other avenues because they saw somebody who was playing it, and they said, you know what, baseball isn't off limits to me, so now I can go into that front office.
Yeah, but I don't care if she's a woman. I don't care if she's green.
It's not off limits now.
If she's got 15
No, but
heads.
you don't see somebody there, and I'm saying once you see somebody who looks like you there, there might be more of a tendency to go, you know what? I changed my
disagree.
mind.
Where
I
they're
don't
gonna go-
want to just do play-by-play for
Where they're gonna
basketball.
go
I want
is
to do
the
play-by-play for
WNBA.
baseball.
They're going to go to the WNBA.
Why? It's
And
a
they're
different
gonna
game
go
of
to- and
basketball.
They're going to go to the LPGA.
Different game of golf.
I'm saying that's where the 99.9% of them are going to go.
Of who?
because
Of the athletes or of people watching?
In this case of the 15-year-old women that are wondering where they can go.
Why? When I was 15, if I thought I could go anywhere, why not?
If she hits 280, it will be a moot discussion. If she hits 280, people will find a place for her.
That's right.
You're not,
and she'll make money. And if she's that good in that sport, she conceivably has an 8-10-year career. That's a big deal.
But if she's your daughter, you're not going to tell her she can't do it. Let's be clear. If she's your daughter and you love her and she's that talented, you're going to make her go out there and you're going to make it happen.
And I'm
Because
telling you where she's going
everybody
to
has to
end
do
up is
one-
the WNBA
It's
or
irrelevant
some other
where you-
women's
it's-
league.
let me
She's
tell you
not.
Because of
something.
what you know
Wait,
right
now.
now.
Wait a sec.
Unless you start,
I've spoken
you
to my
can't go.
parents. You're one of my coaches,
That's right. We
right?
can talk to the
And I'm
coach.
speaking to you. He's my trainer, physical advisor. I've spoken to him. You're my big, older,
Whatever.
avaricious brother, also a journalist. And I'm getting very, very inconsistent signals here. Connie, you're my counselor at school. You're also the athletic director of the school.
Okay.
Can you make any sense of this?
Well, it will never happen. I can't wrap my arms around it all. It has happened in lots of sports. I mean, just what was not available to me that is available to young women right now. Now, you may say it's all women's leagues, but again, Annika made that move. There will be other women making that move into the PGA. Yes, there are going to be certain sports where strength, power, speed will limit women's participation on men's teams to a very select few.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
That's
and
all I'm
that's
saying.
okay. But if you get women participating in hardball versus softball, and there is a women's pro baseball league right now. I mean, if you just get women seeing them on the Yankee team, it doesn't matter if they end up on a women's baseball team. It promotes baseball for women. Right now, many women are still being told in the schools, no, you have softball. That's a like sport. It's not really a like sport. It's a different sport. And they should be allowed, if they can compete on the men's team, to compete.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but all I'm saying is ultimately how big the trend gets is going to depend on economics. And if you look at the WNBA, the LPGA, the economics all stink, especially when you compare it to the men's leagues. WNBA loses pile of money. The women's professional soccer league loses a pile of money.
So where would you, okay, all that taken into account, where would you advise her as her economic advisor
Hey man, my
to
kid,
go to maximize her potential?
Let me tell you, first of all, the premise of the question these days is so outdated because information gets disseminated so quickly. These kids today, they know all this stuff already. They know, they have lists. They know the 10 most highest paid women athletes, the 10 most highest paid male athletes. They know the endorsement deals. They know the TV ratings. This isn't like when we were growing up.
So where would you advise
No, I'd
her
go
to
with
look?
what she said. She's going to follow her passion because if you're a kid and you love something, no matter what I say, it's not going to matter.
Yeah,
I ended up where I ended up because this is what I wanted to do, not because my parents advised me and said, hey, go into journalism. I mean,
right now, I'm not thinking beyond participation. And what I'm hearing is that at a wholesale level, there are possibilities of individual sport, team sport, and an admittedly distant possibility, depending, I think Pat would say, on my physiognomy, a mixed sport. Like, I was watching yesterday Baylor and Brittany Griner. She's 6'8". She's 6'8", which is 1 inch taller than the average NBA player. Can you train me, Pat, if I've got the basic hand skills and body flexibility?
Yeah, I can train you, but you know, there's a big problem. One word, testosterone. Right?
What do you know about
it
that?
changes your physiology. You have a little less muscle mass. Even at that size, you're not. Even if I can train the death out of you, you're not going to jump as high. You're not going to be as, your bones aren't going to be quite as dense. Your pelvis is a little wider than your shoulder base. And you know, there are some physiological elements that are going to make it very difficult for you to compete with a guy of the same size. In a sport like basketball.
So what am I reduced to in mixed sports? Baseball, you think is a possibility?
Yes.
How about tennis?
How about race car driving? Danica, get in there.
She's only finished as high as 4th in NASCAR.
It's okay. A lot of guys haven't done that.
Why are you saying what are you reduced to? I don't understand that. What do you mean reduced? These are great achievements. I mean, why is it being
It's not enough.
Why is it being
It's
reduced?
not enough. Look, let's face facts. Men are less than 50% of the population. Tom Peters, in his books, like In Search of Excellence, said the pronoun for the 21st century is she, that she will control more in the way of politics and finance and commerce. Black Americans had their Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson then transisted into, I know it's a dirty word, O.J. Simpson, where the population didn't quite see him as black. They saw him as functioning in a white or normal environment, whether it was by way of the motion pictures or whether it was by way of endorsements. That was followed by Jordan. And by the time Jordan rolls around, no one is thinking black or white, really. Now, maybe there are a few KKKers who do, so that when we reach the stage of Tiger and LeBron, they're just super athletes. I want to be a super athlete. I do not want to be a woman athlete. I want to be a super athlete. Women have not had their Jackie Robinson. I want to see if I can be their Jackie Robinson. You can take the money. That's 20 years from now. I want to be like Wendy. Wendy makes a difference. How do I, even at this early age, what is it I should do so that I can make a difference, Wendy?
You work hard and you never give up. It's pretty simple. It's not easy, but you just have to, if there's not a role model, you make it your own. You know, things happen over years, and training is training, and things can transcend, but if Tiger tries to go get a cab in New York City on a rainy day, it's still going to be tough. But what you have to do is follow your passion and just stay focused. You're that great for a reason. If you're that talented, it'll happen.
And Arthur, you frame this whole thing like the only way to reach greatness is to do it within on a male team.
Yeah, I agree.
You know that? I don't even understand why
I'm
why
just
we're
exploring
there.
possibilities. That's all I'm doing.
But that's kind of a sexist approach, just talking about it in that regard. You know, what's wrong with Serena? What's wrong with Annika? They show phenomenal competence. And they don't have to do it on a men's team.
That's fine.
But when do we lose this mentality?
Yeah.
That, I mean, you talk about the tournament. It's the men's tournament. You have to say women's tournament. You know, I mean, why is there this difference?
You tell me.
I'm not sure.
You made it.
They are
Everybody
different.
watches the men's tournament.
But they are.
And you have to.
There
How
are
would you
games that are
distinguish
played
them?
differently. I mean, women's college basketball is a different game than watching men's college basketball. It doesn't make it better or worse, but it's different.
I'm talking
it is
about
different.
the mentality.
But what's wrong with saying
Whose
men's tournament and a
mentality
women's
is that?
tournament? That's what they
I
are.
think it's the public's mentality.
The public's
No, but that's what they happen to be. There's a men's tournament and a women's tournament.
But-
What should we call them? The green tournament?
You missed my point.
What is your point?
My point is that we don't even use, we don't put men in front of the tournament, and we know it's the men's tournament.
Right.
You have to say women's tournament.
Because the
how
men's
come, how come it's
tournament-
not the men's
because the
tournament
men's
and the
tournament
women's
is always
tournament?
It was there
interesting.
first.
It's the
Everybody watches
tournament
and
and the
everybody
men's
cares.
and the women's tournament. But I'm saying that's part of the problem.
It's
Problem-
not a
the
problem.
problem
It's
is that-
reality. That's what people watch.
Then
How would
that's
you
the problem with the
differentiate
reality.
Am I
otherwise?
supposed to watch the
That's
women's
the
tournament
problem
to
with
satisfy
the reality.
you?
Ted,
reality
how
is
would
is
you
that-
differentiate? How would you differentiate otherwise? I mean, on a very serious level, how would you differentiate otherwise if you just called both the tournament?
Exactly.
Because in women's basketball circles, they probably do say the tournament. When the people that are working on the women's tournament at ESPN are talking about it, I'm sure they don't say the women's tournament. I'm sure they do just say the tournament.
I
But
bet you're wrong.
if you
I bet you're
mention, I don't think so. I really don't. But I think when you have to differentiate, you have to say men's or women's.
But I agree with her. I think that there are thousands and thousands of women that make a huge difference to men and women that, you know, are playing the WNBA. I mean, I did something for Forbes SportsMoney show, and I was talking to Sheila Johnson and some of the other women owners and stuff. And they run some of their teams better than some of the men do. And I don't mind saying it's the WNBA as opposed to professional basketball. I mean,
Where's
'cause
the audience?
That's what it is.
Where's the audience?
Because the games are not as popular. And people.
Why is that?
Because the men's people have a
Different
limited number of
basketball.
time, and they'd
Because
rather
what?
watch.
Different game of
You're
basketball.
not hitting
And
the
they'd
same
rather
amount.
watch.
I mean,
the men's
it
game.
is.
But that doesn't
People
mean-
love
Isn't
a
part-
lot of
Isn't
people
part
love
of the
over
issue
the
too,
rim.
like how much the men's games are on TV and how
Absolutely.
little coverage
Absolutely.
there is of women's
Absolutely.
sports.
But
I
they're
mean,
on because they get better ratings. It's not
Yeah,
like
but it's
somebody
just-
says.
but
It's not like
ESPN.
somebody says. I'm
Whoa!
prejudiced against
In
this.
2009,
Let me try and embarrass Karin. There you are at MSG, right? And as you said, it's the Knicks, the Rangers, and the Liberty. And you duly noted that tonight there's a Celtics game on. Now, a little birdie told me that the Garden is going into renovation.
Transformation.
And during that renovation,
Transformation.
transformation. See, I'm so old, I remember 2 gardens ago. Now, the Knicks and the Rangers are going to continue to play at the Garden.
Mm-hmm.
And where are the Liberty going?
Newark.
Newark. They've been exiled to Newark, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are we supposed to make of that decision?
It's about the money.
It's about the money.
Yeah.
So, Mike's right. That
Yeah,
the
the
way the
economics
money
of it.
stacks up will, in a sense, continue to put women's sports, in terms of television and money, in servitude.
Yeah.
Well, it
I
doesn't
just
have to
remember
be
the
that.
time, though, and I'm going to go to a different sport. When Serena and Venus Williams came into the tennis circuit, they elevated the game of tennis, and it was a lot more popular with women than with men at the time. And everybody watched.
So they
them.
made a difference.
Absolutely.
They made it can be done.
Absolutely.
Arthur, in the 80s, when I was at the University of Texas, we surveyed our women's basketball fans against our men's basketball fans down there. And there was almost no overlap in that market. The women's basketball fans were our baseball fans. The people that were going out and watching Roger Clemens were the ones coming and watching the women's basketball team. And we had a very good team. We outdrew the men. We got TV deals in local and regional. Every one of our games was on TV, and we had an incredible fan base. So I don't want to hear that it can't happen or it's because the market is only for the men. You have to know who your market is. There are different markets for women's sports. The major decision makers have failed to recognize that or go after those markets. They've put all their eggs in one basket, and they've saturated now the market, like I said, overspent, taken all the time, and now it's a conundrum. It's a problem.
But how do you account for the fact that certain women's leagues have failed?
Do you know how long it took the men's leagues to make money? Well, I did a lot of reading.
See,
on this.
I had this dream a few years back when I was really quite precocious, I'll admit that, or claim that. I thought Mia Hamm was Jackie Robinson. I thought she was going to make the breakthrough for women. Gone.
Well, she can
That whole league is gone.
It's gone because on one day in the same newspaper, Nike took $3 million or $4 million away from the league in their sponsorship and gave, I think it was LeBron at the time, $84 million. Here's 2 articles. It's a self-perpetuating thing. The leadership continues to not want to be out front supporting the women's market that much, and some of the men's other sports. You know, it's everybody wants to play in this small sandbox.
Leadership being who?
The decision makers. Whether it's in college sports, you know, it's still 78% of males' sports budget goes to football and basketball. Mm-hmm. And then the men's minor sports don't get as much, and then they blame the women for taking their money. Instead of saying you don't need 110 on a football team, let's get in the real world. You don't need to be paying $5 million to a head coach and $1 million to your assistants. You don't need to be doing these things. They're blaming the wrong things. But everyone wants to play in this small elitist box. And until there's leadership changes, until we get more dads with more daughters, more people interested in some of these
more
in
women
leadership.
in leadership positions?
Oh, undoubtedly,
Yes.
undoubtedly. I mean, you know, I was a college athletics director, and our women's teams did as well as our men's teams. But I didn't hire an assistant men's football coach and say, by the way, you're really the women's tennis coach, but I needed another assistant men's coach, but you have to coach women's tennis. That's still going on in the colleges. You know, I hired the expert in each one, and lo and behold, and guess what? And women wanted a coach. Let's say women don't want to coach. Women wanted a coach.
But
It's
Connie,
all
Connie,
about
the
intention and effort.
Question though, are you saying that it's strictly a matter of marketing? Like it's not about demand, right? You're saying that the reason that the sports are making more money is because there's more money spent on the marketing of them.
And the history. I mean, it
History.
took, I think, 50 years for the NBA to make the kind of money that they
History,
make
marketing, and the fact that these college sports, when you talked about the coaches making so much money, the fact that the players are not making any money, you know, you have to look at how everything is set up. And let's be real here when you're talking about the economics and all the you know, March Madness that's going on, the schools, the coaches, everyone that's making so much money except for the player who's going to be out if he gets injured soon. I mean, that's the reality when you say people control how things go out, how it's marketed, the history, there's a point to all that. When people are fed this certain diet over years and years, we're getting used to it.
No,
And that's
Connie
what's
has
gotta
used
change.
the word self-perpetuating.
Yep.
Now,
Back to you.
WNBA ever going to be profitable?
I think all of these issues, you know, it does boil down to getting the word out and trying to, you know, have the opportunity to have young girls have positive role models and market and present the WNBA as a great product. I think part of the WNBA's problem is that they really don't promote the fact that there's really great basketball, that they've been promoting that it's a fun family entertainment, you know, bring, you know, and they don't really, there's great basketball, and I think that the WNBA is starting to look at, you know, that as a you know, as a great sport, and that, you know, we have great female athletes there. I think, you know, Connie mentioned that, you know, there are pockets of great basketball, college basketball, and I think if WNBA teams were in those, you know, great women's college basketball areas, they could really start to, you know, get the audience that they need and grow and expand. But, you know, when the league first started, we went to, you know, NBA teams because they thought it was going to be easy. You know, when you're working on an NBA team, so you're doing Knicks all year, and then in the off season you can do the Liberty. It doesn't work that way. You know, the seasons are so intense, and by the time you come to the off season, you need a year-round dedicated staff person that's working just on the WNBA. I think originally the concept was flawed in trying to, you know, just use, you know, same staff in an empty, you know, no one's thinking basketball in the summer, people want to be outside. I think there are some issues that have to be addressed and looked at if they want to be a viable league into the future.
Does the Liberty have
I think they are
a dedicated staff?
Pardon?
How much of a dedicated staff does Liberty have?
Oh, it's changed now. We have the, you know, the basketball operations staff, and then we have, you know, not that many that are on the business side. Yeah. And, you know, we actually do use the assets of all the other teams as well to help, because there isn't a lot of money that's dedicated to, you know, it goes back to the economics again.
Well, right now, Michael Jordan.
That's a euphemism for subsidy.
Right.
You're subsidied by the NBA, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jordan gets paid more in endorsements today than the WNBA pulls in profits during a year.
And if it wasn't
today.
for David Stern in his dedication to the WNBA, it would have been gone quite a while ago.
Well, the other women's league folded
I think they really wanted the teams.
I really believe that.
But and it's not, and I disagree.
Look at the Connecticut Sun. I mean, they're
in
in Connecticut, and they've got a smaller arena. They're able to fill it, the excitement, people get into it. When you're in Madison Square Garden and there are 10,000 people, it looks cavernous. But, you know, there's something about the smaller arena at the Connecticut Sun. There's a history of women's basketball. It's amazing, and the experience is great. And people come back, and then you just start building on that, you know, fandom, and then word gets out, and it's the place to be. It's a hot thing to be. But we're not replicating that in other
There's a lot of good WNBA talent, but it's not, there's only a finite amount of time people are going to spend watching and going to sporting events, and it's not just that the WNBA or women's leagues feel it. Major League Soccer has a lot of great soccer players. They can't make any money. Right. You know, it's the same.
Dana,
I have a nephew play soccer, right? Up until the time he was 15, he would watch some MLS games. Once he got into high school and he wasn't playing soccer, he was playing hockey only, What does he watch now? Professional football. You know,
Yes.
it's a very tough thing to crack. And with Jackie Robinson, you know, Branch Rickey didn't bring him into Major League Baseball because he was looking to push society further. He was some great guy who, you know, loved African Americans.
Really? You're destroying
Did
the
it?
dream.
He did it for money.
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 And he wasn't, for that time, any different in many respects to Tiger Woods today or Michael Jordan or your O.J. Simpson example. There were other African-American baseball players much better than Jackie Robinson. He was brought up because Branch Rickey knew he'd take the crap.
Right, he was cultivated. He was cultivated. He was cultivated. Now, Cameron, you've been my heroine for a long time. Olympian, Ivy League graduate, and now you're the family's lawyer. You're Mom, Pa's lawyer. But you've always been my confidant. Indeed, when I was younger, I used to call you Cammy, the way so many other people called you Cammy. You did what, 4 Olympics?
I did.
But you never took sports further, participatory sports. What caused the decision for you to make a transition to law school? Because now I want to bring into this discussion the rest of my life. That whatever sports may do for me as a participant, there's an afterlife. And I'm not dumb. I have to think about that too. Tell me about you.
Well, I think it was always on my mind. I never wanted to, and I didn't just sort of train for sport. Yes, it was my life, and when you are competing on the Olympic level, it certainly consumes a lot of your time, but I went to Dartmouth while I was competing. I did 1 Olympics before, 2 while I was there, and 1 afterward because school was important to me, and it was important for me to figure out a way to make that happen. Were it up to my team, they would want me to be competing all the time, but I knew that there was going to be life after luge because there aren't so many professional opportunities in the sport, and so that was something that was always sort of internal and important to me. And while I was competing, I was then also on the board of directors of the Olympic Committee, and there interacted with a lot of lawyers, and hence my after luge.
They
life.
Infected you.
They did.
They did.
They did.
All right, now listen.
Actually, it was really interesting because I think I was well respected as a female athlete, but then when I decided to go to law school, it suddenly, they're like, oh great, so why don't you now be on the legislation committee and you can help revise the federal Ted Stevens Olympic and Amateur Sports Act and do all of these other things. So it opened some doors.
Now listen, Ma and Pa are not here. They're not here. It's just you and me.
Okay.
And let's assume I've gotten a little older. Now it's time to think about college or no. Do you have a view? I can turn pro-ish in a couple of sports or go to school.
Or go to school?
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah.
Well, I think if it's a choice, I mean, I hear some other people's experiences from this end of the table, and if I also took 2 years off before I started college, and sport and opportunities in sport come along once in a lifetime. I wouldn't say, completely put school on the back burner, but if you have an opportunity to compete, go out there, be the best, do what you love, and do what's your passion, I would
And in certain
tell you to do
sports,
that.
I can do it now. Other sports I can't. WNBA, I think your rules require 2 years. I can go play in Europe for 2 years. That would be a kick. And possibly come back WNBA. But let me pursue the other hypothesis, school and sports, or school. Now, in the mail this morning came acceptances and scholarships to 2 schools. One is your alma mater, Dartmouth. And I've always wanted to follow you. So Dartmouth is very appealing. And I understand it has certain academic credentials. It's thought by some to be a good school.
By some.
By some, by some. And I also, since you talk about developing passions, basketball is in for me.
Okay.
Not to the exclusion, but it's in for me. I've also gotten an acceptance from Tennessee. Think for me. Think for me.
It's, I think that would be a tough choice. I think I know what I would do, having done it, but if, you know, I think it really depends on, oh, that's tough. That's a tough one. For me, it was always important to have some balance between athletics and academics, and so I made choices based on that and wanting to be accomplished sort of all around and not just as an athlete. So that influenced my choice. If you
Do you think that's because you played luge? I mean, that you participated in luge as an athlete, that there was nothing after school, but in the, you know, if you're a basketball player, if you go to Tennessee, you can go to the WNBA, you can do, you know, there are more opportunities. I think that has to be.
Maybe there are more opportunities in sport, but then are there more opportunities for, you know, professionally if you go to a school like Dartmouth versus Tennessee? And I hear your point as to luge. Maybe because it's, you know, it's an individual sport. Dartmouth certainly didn't have a team. Nobody does. So if I were a basketball player, then I mean maybe Tennessee would make sense. But I think I would also be thinking, what opportunities does school open? What doors does that open after I'm done?
I think it's either, because you know, I think it could be either choice. With an athlete, if someone was passionate about playing basketball, college basketball, there are so many different avenues. And if they go to Tennessee versus Dartmouth, and I love Dartmouth, okay, my son went to an Ivy League as well. But anyway, there are so many avenues for them to go into, even if they decide not to go into the WNBA. They can join my company. Yeah. They can, you know, go into marketing, you know, working for a team or a league, and so there's no limits. And in fact, a lot of these companies love athletes, and I think it's either would work.
And isn't your education, realistically, as somebody who did not play sports in college, my education was up to me in college. Right. And if I went to class or didn't go to class had nothing to do with what other time was there. You can make of that what you want, whether it's Tennessee or Dartmouth or UC Santa Barbara or whatever. Right. You pick your classes, you pick the time that you are going to devote to it. And I've heard athletes argue both ways, that when they're so involved in sport, it's so regimented that they make the time, that they have the time, versus a student that sort of maybe has a little too much free time on their hands. So Tennessee might be the right call, because you may just love what you're doing playing basketball, and you can still get the education that you try to get. I don't know if it matters in the working world now.
Again, there are no guarantees. If you go to Dartmouth, that you're going to become, you know, this successful, productive adult. And, you know, so again, if you're a basketball player and you love basketball, decision's easy for me.
So we're back to passion?
I would go for Tennessee over Dartmouth and play the sport that I love and get the best education that I possibly could get, you know, study, and that's what I did. I chose to go to University of Arizona. I made my decision based on wanting to play tennis and be in the Pac-10, and then I did very well academically, and I knew that I had to think about my future, and if, you know, tennis didn't pan out for me, then I would be able to have my academics to fall back on, and you know, I put a lot into both, but I went after my dream, and my dream was to play college tennis and then, you know, turn pro afterwards. And then, you know, when I was older, I would be able to, you know, start my you know, career.
And
But
you're
a three-sport athlete. True story.
Wait a second. What do mom and dad say?
Well, I have some experience with this very issue. I have a nephew who was recruited for Division III basketball. Coach made a lot of promises. He would start as a point guard freshman year. He arrives, the sophomore point guard who was too sick to come back to the team miraculously recovers. He's not traveling with the team on weekends when they compete. He's not getting any PT. Playing time, he's already decided he's got to transfer to another school. His basketball career tanked. Nothing that he could have done about it. He's healthy. He's playing hard. It seemed to me it was a huge gamble. He could have gone to an Ivy League school and chose to do this instead.
Again, you were in the 4 and you went to Henley last year as well, right? You have a big backhand down the line. You could be a 3-sport athlete at one school. At the other one, all of your eggs are in the basketball basket, right? That's it. That's your shot. Not talking about diversity of experience as a kid or any of that stuff.
So what would you recommend?
You're going to Dartmouth.
I go to Dartmouth.
Oh, yeah.
How about I spread eagle and go to a multi-sport institution, USC, Texas? What does Dad say? Hey,
Go
Dad.
to Stanford.
What do you say?
I go back to your passion. I mean, we started with here. I mean, I would hate for you to be 40 years old and look back and, gee, I wish.
I'd love to be 40 years old.
I understand. As would I. But to be able to, to look back and say, I wonder what I could have done. I wonder how far I could have gone. That would be pretty tough.
But there is a cachet difference. Forgive the elitism this reflects. It is what some of the panelists might call reality. There is a cachet difference between Tennessee and Dartmouth.
No doubt.
No, but if I was your mother, I would also ask if your athletic career ended, what would you want to do? And I would look at that as a factor in deciding between Dartmouth and Tennessee.
Well, being a precocious, now mid-teenager, I'll turn the question back at you, Sharon. You tell me what I can do. Let's say coming out of college, having been as good as Brittany Griner, or having been a great swimmer, or having been a great tennis, what within your world, like if I came to you and said, I'd love it if you would be my agent, what would you say to me?
Again, it depends on the sport. If you're talking about basketball, there are a few more options there, where usually an athlete ends up as an analyst, on television, from a television standpoint. What I mean by that is they basically, they know the game, they have the experience, they understand the sport, and they're able to talk about it and articulate it well. So number one, if they wanted to be on the air though, there's something that they have to have. There's a lot more other factors to look at.
Like what?
Okay,
tell.
Like what you have. There's presence. They can speak. They're articulate. They're not afraid to, to again voice their opinion. I think about someone like Monica Seles and someone like Joe Montana. They were the best at what they did. We decided, okay, let's try them out as a broadcaster. It didn't work because they didn't have, I call it it. And I hate to be cliche about it, but you have to, there's other elements that you have to bring to the table. I mean, Dana could speak to that as well, but the bottom line is when I'm looking at someone, it's beyond, it's yes, they may know the sport, but they have to have energy, they have to have, I call it presence, they have to be unique, there has to be something a little different about them, and they need to be able to articulate themselves extremely well.
So that's what you're looking at?
From a broadcasting standpoint. But I can even go beyond that. They can be like Susan. Oh, sorry, Karin. They could be like Karin. They can work for a league or a team. They can work for Nike. They can work for Reebok. I mean, in so many different capacities. So there's a lot of facets, I think.
Okay. Well, I want to pursue first the media. Then I want to talk to Susan about management. Now, Dana, you made it big on air. Ted, sitting there counting his Emmys. Ted is the man.
Good thing he's your dad then. That works.
Well, I'm proud of my dad. I am proud of my dad. Why am I proud of my dad? Because he put women on television in conjunction with sports, didn't you, Ted?
Yeah.
Why are you so sheepish about it, Dad?
I mean, yeah, I did.
Why'd you do that?
I thought it was good business, and I thought it made sense.
Good business?
I do. There's an audience beyond a bunch of guys sitting out there.
There is?
As far as I can tell.
Now, who'd you put on air?
Oh, Leslie Visser, Mary Carrillo, Andrea Joyce. God, who else? I mean, it just made sense, they followed Phyllis George and Jane Kennedy.
You say that with a slight touch of derision.
No, I don't mean it as derision, but it was it was the proper evolution. I mean,
evolution. That's a much nicer word.
Yeah.
Now, who were they? Who were they?
Who were they? Who? They
the
were
predecessors. Phyllis and Joyce.
They were models, beauty queens. One was
beauty queen.
Miss America.
Miss America.
Miss Americas.
Yeah.
Wow. You replaced Miss Americas with
Leslie Visser types, yes.
Yeah. You say it again very softly.
Well, I mean, I speak softly.
So what was it so engaging about Leslie Visser?
She's smart as hell. She was a great reporter for the Boston Globe. Mm-hmm. There's a guy named Vince Doria, works at ESPN now and runs the news gathering operation. He was the sports editor up there. And he created this incredible sports department, which I was able to pull a few people from. Steal's another word. Leslie was up there in the late 70s doing stuff, going into locker rooms, and I mean, she was tough as nails. Mm-hmm. And she was a great writer, and she's really smart, and she's got a tremendous personality. I mean, what's not to love?
Did you catch any flack? Was there any inside baseball discussion about you're replacing a beauty queen with a journalist?
Sure. But we also pulled Will McDonough out of there. I mean, this was when people said, hey, you don't bring writers and put them on TV. What are you, crazy? I mean, so it actually played out pretty well, I think.
You think there's a good balance now?
No, I don't think there's enough.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Well, I mean, it's, I was talking to my wife about this. How come more women don't watch sports on television? She was saying, because we sit here and you guys control the damn remote control.
Pointing at you.
So, yes, and so we watch what you want to watch in terms of sports. You won't watch what I want to watch in terms of sports.
What does she want to watch?
I mean, she doesn't like sports. Opposites attract,
Now, you should understand, Ted's wife does Westminster. Yeah. She likes dogs.
She loves dogs.
Which makes her A+ in my book.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I'll pass that along when I get home. But it's which to me was what I was, when you had this, when Connee said this was the idea, gender and sports, I'm more interested to know why the WNBA doesn't break through, why the LPGA is sliding backward. I also agree, I mean, Mia Hamm and Brandi Chastain and these were tremendous athletes and great personalities. And I agree, after the 2000 World Cup, I thought, this is going to work.
Can I ask my husband a question?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, hi. I forgot.
How come the NFL's television viewership is over 30% female? Why are women watching football, of all the sports that you used to watch, in such huge volumes?
Well, because they want to be with where their husbands are, and their husbands are watching it, so they've
I don't have a
monopolized
husband. I watch football, and I watched it before this was my job. I love football.
So
It had
do I.
nothing to do with a husband.
Why is that
Except
the
that
game
most
that I
women
started
don't
watching
feel
the
that way.
earliest I can remember watching sports on TV? Why is that working?
Is that an anomaly? I mean, why is it working? I don't know. It's the NFL runs against every trend there is. You know?
A little factoid for some people in the audience. Of the top 30 rated shows in the season, 28 were NFL games.
Yeah.
A 29th was the college football championship, and only American Idol filled out the top 30, which is, if you step back from it, stunning. Absolutely stunning. Now, if you're so big about women on air, and Dana is a perfect example of a woman on air, but we drop a little footnote that Dana basically covers men's sports. Men's sports. When I watch the pre- and post-game shows, both on CBS and Fox, I don't see a single woman.
I know.
Yeah.
Not a single
they've
woman.
got like 5 or 6
Yeah,
guys.
what's up with that, Ted?
It looks like an airline counter, you know. I mean, it's ridiculous. Look at the men's tournament. It's 6 guys across. I mean, really, you feel like you should be getting in line for tickets.
What is
But
that?
but the
What is
broadcast.
that?
I
If
mean,
Leslie Visser
I
is
think
so
it's a
good,
lack of imagination.
Yeah, the broadcast networks
It's
have
the
done.
easy thing to do.
Yeah, but the broadcast networks through the years have done this where well, it's not relegating women, but they end up pigeonholing women and putting them as a sideline reporter or a feature reporter, maybe hosting a halftime, which Hannah Storm did when she was with NBC with the NBA. So that's, I agree with Ted, where the vision is just very, very limited.
And there are only 2 women that do play-by-play for football right now that I know of. So, I mean, whether that's vision or somebody thinking, women have to want to do it.
Yeah, I also think
I do think women do want to do some of those roles and don't get those.
Yeah, but
opportunities.
it still comes down to money, and the reason is because even the men, just like Ted said, when they line up all these guys, none of these guys are rocket scientists that are asking really intelligent questions.
Really?
You know,
Charles Barkley is not a rocket
right?
Charles is very entertaining.
They're not
TV
in general, I don't care whether you're talking about sports or not sports, it goes down to the lowest common denominator.
So then shouldn't personality matter? Should it not matter whether it's a man or a woman?
I would agree.
I would
agree.
experience in the sport
Look who's on.
Yeah.
But look
Well,
who's
for
on.
your analysts.
Do you know why Sports Illustrated exists today?
The bathing suit issue.
Because of its bathing suit issue, swimsuit issue.
Now let me turn.
That carries the magazine through the whole year.
Let me turn to Susan. We've explored the possibilities post-participation through our agent, possibly through on-air. What about management? You sit there, the personification of a human exception.
Well, I mean, yes and no. But a woman couldn't do a job that was equal in terms of management of a professional team unless they came to the table with the skill set that was prepared to deal with it. There's a lot to deal with because you're one of everybody else is different than you are. It's not the easiest thing in the world, and you have to have a really thick skin and develop it and have a really good sense of who you are. If you like yourself, you have a shot. But what we're talking about at this table is to put women in a position that they may not want to be in. It takes a very strong woman to want to be in a place where she's the only one of her kind. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone unless they wanted it for themselves. They have to really want it. I'm sure that Dana knows the same thing. You have to really want that. You have to really, really want that.
Speaking very frankly, it sucks some days.
Yeah.
Is that a technical term?
That is a technical term, yes.
It sucks.
I can't use it usually on ESPN, so I'm using it now.
What sucks?
You are the only face out there that is a female face. You are the only voice in a room that is a female voice, and whether your beliefs and what you're saying and your experience is actually even more accurate than some of the men, oftentimes you're not listened to the same way they are.
That sounds like credibility.
No, your credibility may be better than the men.
I know, no, your credibility may be better, but you're not given credibility because you're the woman.
You're discounted oftentimes. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, your credibility is put second merely because of your gender. Same credentials, more awards. She's really good at what she does. Yeah, but you know, we're used to seeing men up there all the time. We'll just stay with that.
Keep
she has a good point.
Well,
but,
hey,
yeah.
Dana, how many female producers and directors are there?
Really low. Directors more so than producers. I think I was trying to think. It's really low. I mean, I've had one female producer on my show. I've had 2 female producers, I would say, over the past 4 years, and countless numbers of men. I mean, it's really in a room
raw
like
discrimination here?
In college athletics, it's mandated that you must have what's called a senior woman administrator in the athletic department, no matter what division. You must have a woman in upper management. However, it doesn't tell you what skills that you're to develop in that woman. So they give the women the minor sports. They won't let them work with football. They won't let them work with the budget. They won't let them negotiate TV. And then when they go to make that next leap, they go, you don't have the skills. So they keep you at this level. If you are lucky and you make that leap into the athletic director's position, then you're serving on NCAA committees with all men. You go, you speak your mind on those. They treat you nicely, professionally. No one supports you. Then you get back to your office. You just spend 3 days in a committee of 13 men and 1 woman or 2 women, and they start calling you and asking you for advice or saying that was a good point, but they wouldn't say it in front of their peers.
And Susan's nodding.
Well, I mean, because it's the way it is.
How do we break that?
How
do we break that? I mean, a story that's floating around is that there have been a couple of women who have sought general manager positions with Major League Baseball clubs. Kim Eng is probably the most known of that subset. Wanted to be GM of the Dodgers. Gave up. And yes, there is a woman who's in charge of the Baseball Hall of Fame. There's a certain perversion in that juxtaposition. How do you break in? How do you break that cycle?
You have to have a very strong voice, and you have to be very sure of who you are, and have very good skills in the particular job you're supposed to be doing, better than probably most of your competition. So you have to excel to the max, and have the courage and the strength to want to do that.
And you need Ted Shaker or Dick
And Ted.
Ebersol.
And I'm
You know, people, men who are willing to step up.
Well, that, you know, and
say this is what
it's
we need.
also someone, it's like, you know, men and women, you need somebody that's going to put their arm around you and mentor you, help you find the way. One of the things we always did is John Madden, okay, here's an example. He came off the field and he wanted to try television. In his first season, we had 6 or 7 different NFL teams at that time, and we put him on the number 6, and no one saw him all season, so he could spend the whole year, that whole season, falling flat on his face, learning how the business works, getting feedback from the people in New York on how to improve, going through his tapes with him, et cetera, and that's what we did. And as opposed to when Joe Montana was hired at NBC, they put him in the number 1 spot right away. So he's there, you know, and unless he is drop dead great, he is going to fail.
Yeah.
You know, and so women, you know, to be producers and directors, they need the opportunity. Then they need to be given, you know, the proper kind of feedback, and allowed to understand the right way to do it.
And
Right
they
and wrong.
isn't it a path too? Because if you talk about putting Leslie Visser on the air in the 70s, I mean, I may have only had 2 producers over the past 3 years, but there are more. I mean, there are a lot more women in the sports TV industry than I remember ever seeing when I was trying to break into it. It does take time, sadly. That's part of
But
it.
also what we're talking about? Patience, time.
But also with producers and directors, female producers. I'm very close to a network at CBS, a network director, female director, who said she had to speak loud. She had to speak the loudest in a room filled with men in order to get those opportunities to direct an NFL football game. And, you know, and sometimes women, you know, unfortunately, they're not speaking loud enough, but they do need a mentor. They do need someone that that believes in them and that can, again, it's talent development that will put them in positions to you know, be an associate director first, or train them in a small setting, and then just kind of look long term, look long range, and that's not happening a lot at the networks anymore.
Or when they are that loud, I won't swear again, I promise. They're called the B word instead of being somebody who's just trying to get ahead. We talked about this earlier. That happens a lot if you are very forceful in trying to push your way in.
How long do you suppose it will be before this discussion becomes irrelevant?
As long as it takes to break up an old boys club, because that's really what we're talking about, especially when you talk about television. The amount of people that are in that business is very small, and they all know each other, and
they're comfortable with each other.
When you go into a level of being a GM, I'm professional, we're talking about very small numbers, and it is a club. And just like everybody else had problems breaking through when it was a race thing, it sounds very similar to me. Being in a situation where you're the only one or something, how do you get through? How do you make headway? This is the same discussion that we've talked about before. But you have to really understand in sports, the reason why athletes can make such an impact is because we have so many more opportunities. It's based on just your talent. When you get to this level of television and professional sports, it is pretty small, and you got to break through.
What's odd is that, you know, back when Title IX was introduced, the number of kids your age playing sports, the men, or the boys numbered the women by, you know, I mean, ridiculous amount. I mean, 80-20, something like that. In 2009, I think it was something like a group of, say, 8 million kids who play sports at high schools.
6.
Is it 6 million? 4 million, well, what I saw was 4 million were boys and 3 million were girls. And we are still in this odd place. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, Tom Peters, you know, this is going to be the century of she.
We're ready.
Yeah, but in this industry, we ain't, you know, and it's really weird. And I think it's a real shame. I really do, because I have 2 daughters.
All right, let's let people in the audience go to the mics. They're sitting out there in the aisle. If you've got a question, a comment, no hard objects. Come on, come on, come on. Unless you're all asleep. Anybody? Oh, good, a human being. 2 human beings.
I'm always good for a microphone. So I have a question. I'm going back to the beginning of the conversation. You all talked a lot about passion. And I wonder if there's a point in time where pure talent trumps passion. In other words, there's a child that's talented, that's multi-talented. Is there a point where, as a parent, as a coach, as a trainer, you want to veer them more towards the talent rather than the passion? Because won't the passion come with the success?
Oh, that's a good question. But I'll tell you from a coaching standpoint, it's passion. If you have 2 athletes, one's not so talented, but one's going to work really hard and they have the passion, this one is going to succeed most of the time. I feel very strong about that.
I agree. I would tell you also, you will never see those 2 things separated. With an elite level athlete, they are passionate, period. That comes with the package.
Yeah. But would there come a time, if I get the question at least partially right, would there come a time where you've got in front of you a woman of any age, and she has talents in 2 directions, and it's clear that the talent in one direction is stronger than the talent in the other direction, but her passion is with the lesser talent?
Exactly.
Would you try to redirect?
No. No, absolutely. I would never, ever take someone away from what they truly desire to do, because ultimately, regardless of their talent, by pursuing that talent without the requisite drive and the requisite emotional investment, they're not going to progress the same way. They're not going to evolve the same way. They're not going to perform regardless of their level of talent.
But really, haven't other countries been doing this?
But I have to ask you a question. For you, a question. Define talent.
Well, I would say if she were proving to be more successful in one area than another. For example, she's talented in 2 sports. She's a tennis player, she's a swimmer.
Right.
It's true that she has a lot of talent in both, but she's proving to show a lot more talent in swimming. She has passion for both. Isn't there some responsibility, particularly in terms of the coach or the trainer, that she should be veered towards the direction that could possibly give her more success?
As a trainer, the job, and I believe as a coach as a job, is to simply maximize what they want to do, right? You take what they want and you let them be the best they can be at that thing, right? Not really try to influence them necessarily about what that thing should be. They come to you and they say, I want to do this, and you say, okay, let's do it, and let's max it. Do it the best that you can do it.
So Pat, when Michael Jordan lost his passion for basketball, it'd be okay for you that he changed to baseball?
Oh,
say follow your passion.
Absolutely. And be the best you can be. What I would probably tell Mike is you're a little late.
Well, and you'll burn kids out.
Okay, we have somebody. There's an interesting underlying ethical question.
And you'll burn kids out. And the last thing you want them to do is walk away from sport because you've tried to put them in this box where you think they're going to be more successful, where maybe they could get a college scholarship, where all the parents put a lot of pressure.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of kids that still want to play 3 sports, and by the time they're 8, they're being told, oh no, because you want the college scholarship. And guess what? By 15, they're not playing anymore.
Oh, let's be real clear. These are the two of the best parents in the world right here. Right, because most of the pressure comes from the parent, not from the child. I mean, this is a whole other part of the discussion.
Pat. Okay.
I actually have 2 questions. The first one, I guess it's kind of directed towards Pat. If you have a young girl, Arthur, and you see that she has the talent to go into a men's sport, how do you psychologically prepare her to do so? Because there's a lot of struggle there, and I feel like you talk about physical training, but then how do you mentally train? And then the second question is, for a lot of the women up there, how are you mentoring other women or younger girls to then follow in your footsteps?
You don't separate mental training from physical training, as far as I'm concerned. When you train the individual, you train everything about them. When you come in and you sit down, you're all there. Your hamstrings, the relationship with your parents, your appetite, all of it. So what you do is you try and train that individual to be the best that they can be and utilize the things that they have inherently as well as they can utilize them. And you try to forget about what's ahead or who they're competing with. You just do the best you can do, and then we'll worry about who you're competing with or against later.
Well, I mean, how much of your training is talking to them and getting to know them? And
everything. Everything. You can't train somebody you don't know. It's impossible.
Again, heads nodding. Next.
Well, she did ask how we mentor women in the field. Yeah. I try very hard to mentor women in college athletics, and more times than not, from the young women, I'll tell them to join one of the bigger women's support groups in college athletics, and they'll say, oh no, I'm afraid to do that. I've already been told by my athletic director, if they're the assistant or associate, that if I join that group, they won't take me to the NCAA convention. They'll punish them. They will punish them to network with other women. You sit at my knee, you take counsel from me, and you definitely don't get it from other women. That's a big problem in college athletics.
Well, I would have to say from the women's sports, one way I mentor, of course, is what I do with young people. When you ask the question about young talent, I've got 10,000 kids that have gone through my program. I've created 2 Olympians. It's always about who's got the drive. That's just the way it is. But the other thing is that you go by example. Many of us here know each other and we work together and we travel together. You really do have to make a conscious effort to support other women. It does take that, and you have to reach down. There's just no other way around it. And one other point, you were mentioning great athletes of the 20th century, and Billie Jean King is the biggest example of that. She went out and she proved it, and she's worked so hard to make sure women have another path, and she's always willing to give back.
Okay.
I'll just hold this. All of you women have broken out into fields that are pretty male-dominated. You guys can argue. I want to cover something that you guys kind of talked about earlier with, you know, a hypothetical situation of a girl becoming a professional baseball player in hardball instead of softball. And there was a story that was covered by ESPN a few weeks ago about these 2 high school pitchers who are female in hardball making their debut at the high school level against each other. How do you see this taking, like, you know, a bigger step into the future of women breaking into male-dominated sports, and, you know, possibly going into the discussion again of where this can go in terms of, you know, having the next Jackie Robinson type player who's a woman, and making that into a new, I guess, revolution for women in sports?
Well, Mike before said it'll never happen. Does anybody have a different view?
I think for many years people thought that you know, it was impossible to run a mile in, I don't know, even the 4 minute mile.
Yep.
And when someone did, then everyone was doing it after that. I think once you get to the point where you see women that are now playing or girls playing in boys' sports and excelling, that then you get that younger girl that says, oh my gosh, she can do it, I can do it. And then that's when you start to have a groundswell of I think, female athletes that, and maybe they don't make the boys' team, but then they become great athletes anyway, and they see that they can do it. And, you know, I think it's so important to have role models. I think it's so important to have the people that do succeed, that get the exposure, and that's part of the problem, is that we want to make sure that, you know, the media will also, you know, give that exposure so that can inspire young people.
I think
okay,
also,
we're only going to deal with the people in line at this point.
Can I say one thing on that? I think it's important too, and I don't remember who brought it up earlier when we were talking about whether a woman could get into a man's sport. It is okay to excel at a women's sport. I mean, the biggest knock on Michelle Wie became she was trying to beat the men before she could beat the women. And it's wonderful to break down barriers, and there's so many different elements of sports. And yeah, I'm going to compete against guys at my job because we're not actually competing. We're anchoring and hosting shows, so we're on a level playing field in that sense. But it's okay to it's great if women want to get into men's sports, but it's also okay just to try to take women's sports to a different level. And that, whether their finances there or not, I do think if some of the women's sports had a different level of play, they might get more attention.
As Sharon said, the Williams sisters.
Right, exactly. Great example.
I really enjoyed watching them play at a very high level. I mean, that was fabulous. That's what it takes, so that their highlights are on your show, you know?
And would you be willing to have, if those women played professional baseball in the men's league, see the end in basketball, let's say, the end of the WNBA? Because that's what happened when African Americans went into Major League Baseball. The Negro Leagues, what they used to call them, went away.
But I think your point was very accurate, that I don't think it would get to that level.
Oh, I don't either, but I'm just saying, be careful what you wish for.
All right, next. It is interesting that the difference between men and women in the marathon is now 15 seconds. It's also interesting that
Whoa,
in
whoa,
2000...
whoa, whoa, 15 minutes, not 15 seconds.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that in
someday
the 2010 race, was it, Wayne, was it 8 or 9? 9 women finished in the top 50. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Janie President. I am 14 years old.
A little louder, please.
My name is Janie President. I am 14 years old, and I attend the Business and Sports School. I have 2 questions. Are there any mentoring programs that you have and can recommend high school female athletes?
What's the question?
Answer.
Mentoring.
Yeah.
What's the
I
question?
would
Mentoring
say
programs for
mentoring
female high school athletes.
I think in New York there's an organization called Power Play, and they have specific mentoring, girls-based sports mentoring programs, and they target high school athletes, and it's run in New York, and it's called Power Play. So there are some programs like that.
And second?
My second question is there any advice that you would give to a woman that is looking forward to pursue a career in sports?
A piece of advice.
Don't take no for an answer.
Right.
Keep trying. No matter how many times you're told no, find a different way in, and you can do it.
Thank you.
That seems to be a consensus. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Jasmine Murray. I'm 17 from the business.
Again, right into the mic so we can hear you up here.
My name is Jasmine Murray. I'm 17 from the business sports school, and I have 2 questions. How old would you be to be a professional athlete?
How old to be a professional athlete? If I remember the NBA, the WNBA rules, it's 22 or 2 years in some sort of a professional league.
Yeah, I think it depends on the sport. You know, you can decide to turn pro, which means that you give up your amateur status and then you can't play in college. And it depends, back when I was playing, I decided that I was going to maintain my amateur status because I wanted to go to school on a scholarship. And, but, then there are sports like the WNBA, you can't turn pro until, you've reached, a certain age or have gone to school or played overseas. So I think it depends on the sport. In gymnastics, you can turn pro at, in
15 maybe.
Yeah, and figure skating, it's very young, so it really depends on the sport.
Okay. Does age matter in the genders?
Again?
Does age matter in the genders?
Gymnast. Does age matter?
In gymnast?
No, in genders.
Genders.
Oh, in genders.
In the genders.
In gender.
No.
Well, NBA has their rule. I mean, it's the same sort of thing where, like, the NBA has their rule that you've got to have 1 year removed, I guess you could say it, from your high school.
Right.
But
NFL is a couple.
Yeah, it is interesting that for the men it's 1 year. For the women it's 2 years. Yeah. So there are differences. There are differences in some sports.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Peter Kwan. I'm a first semester student at the Tisch Center. And even though I'm studying hotel finance right now, I just want to thank you all for coming tonight because really you've reaffirmed my love for sports. I've been a big sports fan all my life, so I just really want to thank you. Ms. Jacobson, you actually kind of stole my thunder when you brought up Michelle Wee's name because when Professor Miller was discussing that, that precocious teenager type, I was thinking about Michelle Wee actually. And I was wondering where did it go wrong actually? Because felt like there was so much hype where they talked about her being like the next Tiger Woods in women's golf, and just seemed like perhaps that I'm thinking maybe women don't have enough of that support system for them to get to where they need to go. And it's not only just about talent, but I just feel like that maybe there needs to be some kind of support system there for women to become, I guess, the next Babe, Dickerson or somebody. So I'm just kind of curious what do you feel about that?
She didn't focus on her game. I mean, ultimately with any athlete, that's what happens. And she was I believe, a victim of her own success at some point because she was so talented. She was so highly sought after for endorsement deals, and the pressure, again, she's a kid, and the pressure on her was enormous. And so what she ended up doing was, in terms of her practice hours tripled in a 2-year period. You can't sustain that. You can't sustain that mentally, you can't sustain that physically. And so her game suffered. And then in a game like golf, or specifically a game like golf, which is a fine motor skill game, let's call it. It's not something where people that miss putts in golf don't miss them because physically they can't do it. It's not like high jumping. They miss a putt because they can't focus mentally and do it. And so what happened to her was she got distracted, literally. The good news for Michelle is that she's got about another 15 or 20 years to get it back. So,
where was she getting her advice? Do you have any idea?
Go ahead.
At home.
Yeah.
At home. Also, the media,
Dad.
it was sort of evil in that sense. We love a good story. We'll ride it till the end. Absolutely. I mean, we're a business. We're going to make money. Michelle Wie was a great story everybody wanted to watch. We'll ride it until she's not performing. That's
And then
we
you
are
distracted
in that
her.
sense.
You distracted her. All right, next.
I know there's like a 12-year-old tennis player, female girl. She's at Balsam, and there are like videos of her on YouTube, just hardcore training with like thigh muscles bigger than most guys who are teenagers. At what point does it become like kind of ethically immoral to just do this to young girls? Like, where do you guys think this ethical border should be drawn?
It's been ethically immoral for a long time. And it's not new.
Boys and girls?
Oh, yeah.
For boys
and girls. But, in camps like that, you get kids, and typically they come from lower income families, right? Recently with tennis specifically, it's been a lot of Eastern Europeans, and you've seen it. They go to these clinics, and, mom and dad bring them down there, and they just drive them. And drive them and drive them and drive them. And, you see one out of every 600, right? The one that can actually sustain it and hang in there, and 599 of them fall away. But, you're asking a question of ethics in sports?
Well, but at what point do you draw the line where it becomes social?
When I worked for the U.S. Olympic Committee, we studied that, and one of the things that was notable was that the 12-year-old that's winning the nationals at 12 are not winning the nationals at 18.
No, the Capriati broke.
Pardon?
Like Capriati, she broke. She
yeah,
I mean, like at what point?
Yeah.
You mentioned
burnout. It's the things that we've all discussed, and
absolutely. Voluntary is part of the problem.
Yeah. All right, one more person. It's interesting for those who watch television. Last night there was a rerun on Law and Order SVU about a completely exploitive gym instructor, and it was just classic. Go ahead.
Good evening. I actually come from a kinesiology background, not a business background, so I look at this like Pat looks at this. And it's not a matter of women playing with men. We are different. There is a physiological difference. They're women's sports because we're creating an equal playing field. Women can't compete. We're not as strong. We don't have testosterone. Our bodies are made differently. So with that, now that women are being brought up, and we talked about the sociology of just the history of sports, Title IX was finally passed, and women are now finally encouraged to play sports. Here are two women who have been, proactive in women's sports. In your generation, would you say that it's your generation where it wasn't promoted while you were young, whereas now it's just a matter of time that our generation of young girls who are interested in sport are now becoming women who are interested in sport. So now those in charge of the sporting events, those paying the checks to these athletes, will eventually become women, and women will eventually be in charge, thus pushing up the female WNBA and female sports. So just making the WNBA equal to the NBA, not saying women have to play on the NBA.
Reaction?
Social change, legislation, civil rights, Title IX for social change. You legislate it, but it doesn't really change for like 3 generations. It doesn't change people's attitudes overnight. They're held accountable to a certain extent, but never enough. So you're right on point. As more women play, as more men grow up with women playing,
That's the key.
it's a whole different attitude. About 6-7 years ago, I hired this young male coach, and it's kind of a long story, and I'll shorten it in the fact that a father came in to give me a hard time about this incident that happened between the men's and women's swim team. And for 45 minutes, he talked at me and told me that this incident was because men like to show dominance over women in sport, and I had to understand that if I knew how to write policy, this would never happen. And he was a member of a local school board, and he was going to mentor me. Now, I had been in the field already 28 years, and and I could see my young 25-year-old male coach's eyes getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the best part of that story is when that father left, the coach turned to me and said, "How dare he? How dare he think that he could mentor you? Where does he come off?" I said, "Well, welcome to my world, Pat." I said, "And if it wasn't for sexual harassment, I'd give you such a bear hug." I said, because, the fact that you as a male recognize that, I said, I wish I had a videotape so I could show young women in the field coming up that this was an inexperienced, underprepared male, but because it was a male, trying to tell me how to do my job. So it was fabulous to see that, and I see that more and more. I see that with men in my classes when we talk about these things. They're used to having women in sport. They're used to being around. When they become key decision makers, they'll have no problem with women sitting at their side as key decision makers.
The images are so important. I mean, I've seen Dana every morning on ESPN, every morning, talking about all this stuff. Says to girls, women, hey, you know what? I could do that. I can aspire to that. That's exactly what it's about, and hopefully that'll be true.
And it tells boys, little boys, that it's okay, and it's great that she's there.
That's exactly
and that's what the WNBA does too. Is they go and watch because their moms take them or whatever, and they are used to it, and that makes it normal.
It's not even an issue.
It's not an issue.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just to be autobiographical by analogy, nothing more. I come out of an environment in which, when I was in law school, with 540 classmates, only 11 were women.
Really?
And when I went to practice in a big Wall Street type firm and tried to convince the hiring partner that there was somebody in the class behind me that the firm had to hire, and as soon as I used the pronoun she, he looked at me and said, "You don't understand, this firm does not hire women." And now I look at that very person as she sits on the United States Supreme Court. And I look at that court and I see 3 women. And I look at my class and I see my class is 50% female. I don't see them anymore. Yeah. I see people. Mm-hmm. Now, to be sure, that took the better part of a half century.
How many partners of law firms do you have of women?
More and more and more.
Numbers
and
are
more.
sickening. 16%.
They're small,
16%.
but that's another debate, Susan.
I know.
The fact
I just
is,
want you to know it's not a rosy world out there.
I didn't say it was rosy.
We still have to keep fighting.
It's remarkably different than it used to be. My thanks to this panel, who have given of themselves tremendously. Thank you, John.